The smell hits me first, every time. The stale coffee from the urn in the corner, the kind that's been sitting since noon, losing its heat, losing whatever it started with. I can still smell it when I'm driving past a hotel. It comes out of nowhere and I'm back in that room before I can stop it. This is the part I've never told anyone. I'm sitting in my car in the parking garage underneath the hotel. I came early because they told me to set up before the guests arrived. I have my kit in the passenger seat, the soundboard, the cables, the little bag of adapters that always somehow end up being the one thing you need and don't have. I'm not inside yet. I keep sitting here instead of going in. I don't know why I'm telling you this. I don't know why now. Maybe because it's been long enough that it doesn't feel like it belongs to anyone anymore. Maybe because you're the first person who asked. The room was already half done when I got there. Not the setup was still in progress. I mean the room itself, the way it felt when you walked in. There was a crew working on the lighting, adjusting the key light on the left side because someone decided the original angle was making shadows. The cameras weren't set up yet. The chairs were in place, two of them facing each other across a table with a dark cloth on it. A pitcher of water, two glasses. The glasses were already fogging up from the cold in the room. It was too cold, I remember that. The air conditioning was running and nobody had asked it to be that cold and it was just sitting there, making everything feel sharp. I could feel it on the back of my neck. I kept thinking someone should say something but nobody did. I had my clipboard. That's how I was supposed to be identified if anyone needed me for anything. A junior sound engineer with a clipboard. I wasn't the lead, I was the second chair. The person who watched the levels while the real person took breaks. I didn't mind that job, it meant I could watch without being watched. The crew was moving around, the camera operators were marking their frames with tape on the floor, and I was running my cable check when he came in. Not Obama, not yet. One of his aides, a man I didn't recognize then but I recognize now, came in and said something to one of the producers. They talked for a minute, low, and the producer nodded, and the man left. I didn't think about it again. I would find out later why that mattered. About an hour before everything started, I was in the hallway near the green room. Not because I was supposed to be there, because I was running a longer cable than I expected, and I needed to check the output at the other end of it. I was walking back toward the room when I heard a voice around the corner. Someone on a phone, the kind of voice you hear when someone doesn't know they're being overheard. I couldn't make out the words, just the tone, the way someone's voice changes when they're not performing for anyone when they're just talking. And then the voice stopped. A door opened and closed, and I kept walking. I didn't know who it was, not then. I found out later, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The room filled up slowly. Staff first, then crew, then the guests began arriving. I was at my station by then, the sound board in front of me, the waveforms moving across the screen like little mountains. I was watching the levels. That's what I was supposed to be doing, watching the levels and nothing else. But you can't help what you see. She came in first. That's not how it was supposed to go. The schedule had Obama arriving first, getting settled, being in position when the other side arrived. But she walked in about 8 minutes early and the whole energy of the room shifted. Not dramatically, just a little. Like the temperature in the room dropped another degree even though the air conditioning hadn't changed. Ivanka Trump, with her people behind her, 3 of them, maybe 4, I wasn't counting. I was watching the waveforms and also watching her face because I didn't know what else to do with my eyes. She was wearing a dark jacket. She had a folder under her arm. She was smiling at someone as she walked toward the table, and the smile was the kind you practice. The kind where your eyes do the thing your mouth is doing even though you don't feel what you're showing. I know that smile because I've seen it 1,000 times in that job. You learn to recognize the difference between real and performed. She set the folder on the table. She pulled out her chair. She sat down across from the empty chair that was waiting for him. She crossed her legs under the table. She smiled again, this time at the cameras, and then she turned that smile on the empty chair like she was already introducing herself to someone who wasn't there yet. I watched her throat. I don't know why, I wasn't trying to read her. I wasn't trained for that. I just happened to be looking at her face when she wallowed, and I noticed that she swallowed after she smiled. Like the smile and the swallow were connected. Like the smile pushed something down her throat and she had to get rid of it. At the time, I thought it was nothing. He came in a few minutes later. Alone. No aides, no staff, just him, walking to the table like he owned the room even though it wasn't his room. He poured himself a glass of water from the pitcher. He sat down. He set the glass down in front of him and he looked at her and he didn't say anything. She said something first. A joke, something light, the kind of thing you say to make a room feel less formal. He smiled and nodded and that was it. The cameras weren't rolling yet. There was still about a minute of pre-roll, the countdown on the producer's board, the moment when everything looks like nothing and is about to become everything. And then the red light came on. The first thing I noticed was the swallow. Every time Obama said a sentence, she responded, "That's normal. That's what you do in a conversation." But there was a pause before each response, maybe half a second, and at the end of that pause she swallowed. Not a normal swallow. The kind of swallow you do when you're buying time, when your brain needs an extra beat to catch up with what's coming out of your mouth. I watched it happen. I watched her throat move every single time. And I remember thinking in the first 10 minutes that this was not what confident looks like. This is what trying to look confident looks like when you're not used to doing it in front of someone who can see through it. He wasn't doing anything to make it happen, he was just talking. Calm, low, the same voice the whole time, like he was explaining something to a class. He asked her questions, he made points, he waited for her to answer. And every time she answered there was that pause, that swallow. The room smelled like stale coffee. I don't know why that detail sticks with me, but it does. Every time someone walked past the urn in the corner, the smell got stronger for a second and then faded back into the room. Like the room was trying to remind me of something. About 20 minutes in, she changed direction mid-sentence. I almost missed it. I was watching the waveform and I heard her voice shift, like she was starting to say one thing and then the words that came out were something else. Not an interruption, not a correction. Just a moment where the sentence she was building didn't match the sentence she started. She was talking about trade policy, something specific, something detailed, and she was halfway through a point when her voice did something strange. Like someone had pulled the road out from under her, and she kept walking without noticing the ground was gone. She finished the sentence with different words than she started with, and nobody in that room noticed except me. I looked at the waveform, the levels were fine, the audio was clean. Nobody else was listening for what I was listening for. This is where I almost stopped telling this story. But the next part is the part I keep coming back to, the part that won't let me leave it alone. The first commercial break came about 30 minutes in, the cameras pulled back, the red light went off, the room exhaled. I watched them both stand up. The crew moved in with water bottles. Someone was talking to Obama about the next segment, something technical, something about timing. She was on the other side of the table talking to one of her aides, and the aide was nodding and she was shaking her head, and then she turned and looked at him. He was standing by the table, holding his water glass, not talking to anyone, just standing. And she looked at him and he looked back at her and the room went very quiet even though people were still talking. He asked her a question. I couldn't hear it. My mics were set for the table, for the speakers, for the formal audio. I wasn't monitoring the ambient channel, the one that picks up everything else, so I missed the words. But I saw her face when he asked it, and I saw her face for the 3 or 4 seconds after he finished asking. She didn't have an answer. She didn't say she didn't have an answer. She didn't shake her head or hold up her hand or ask him to repeat it. She just stood there holding her water glass, looking at him, and her mouth opened and nothing came out. For 3 or 4 seconds. In a room full of people, with the cameras off. And then she smiled, that practiced smile, and she said something I couldn't hear, and he nodded and walked away. The cameras came back on 30 seconds later, and the conversation resumed and nobody mentioned what had just happened. Nobody asked her the question again. It was like it had never been asked. But I saw her face. I saw the moment when she didn't have an answer and she knew she didn't have one and she had to pretend that she did. The second half of the conversation was different. I don't know how to explain it except to say that the room felt different. Not the temperature, not the smell, not the buzz of the overhead light that nobody else seemed to notice. Just the feeling in the room, the weight of it, like something had shifted that you couldn't see but you could feel. She was still fighting. You could see it in the way she leaned forward, the way she raised her voice slightly when she made a point. But the fighting had a different texture now. It was the kind of fighting you do when you know you're losing and you can't figure out how to stop, when every move makes it worse and you make another one anyway. He just kept being calm, he answered her points, he asked her questions, he let her talk and then he talked and then he let her talk again. And every time she talked she lost a little more ground, not because he was attacking her, because he wasn't. And then, about 50 minutes in, I saw her hand. It was her left hand, resting on the table next to her folder, and her right thumb was digging into the side of her left hand, just under the knuckle, not hard enough to leave a mark but hard enough to feel something real while everything around her was slipping away. She did it during one of his longer answers. She didn't stop the whole time he was talking, and when she answered, she stopped. And then, a few minutes later, she started again. I don't know if she knew she was doing it, I don't know if anyone else saw it, but I saw it. And it was the thing that told me she wasn't in control of the room. She had never been in control of the room. She was just very good at pretending. There was a backup plan. I didn't know about it that morning. The producer had mentioned something in passing, something about a secondary setup, something about what happens if the primary feed fails. I wrote it down in my notebook and forgot about it. I found out later what the backup plan actually was, not from anyone in that room, from someone who wasn't, someone who heard about it years later and put the pieces together. The backup plan was a question. A single question designed to be asked off mic during a commercial break when the cameras weren't rolling and the room thought the conversation was paused. A question that nobody in the official prep materials had covered. A question that someone knew she wouldn't be ready for. I don't know who designed the question, I don't know who gave it to him, but I know that when he asked it, he knew what the answer would be, and I know that when she didn't answer, he knew that too. And he let it go, he let the moment pass, he didn't follow up. He didn't press. He just nodded and walked away, and the cameras came back on and the conversation resumed, and nobody in that room except her and him and me knew what had just happened. The end was almost gentle. They shook hands. The cameras were still rolling, but the conversation was over, the formal words being said, the thanks, the pleasantries, the things you say when the performance is done. He said something to her about the discussion being productive. She said something back about looking forward to continuing the conversation. The smiles were back, the practiced ones, and nobody in that room knew what I had seen except me. They walked out different directions. She left first, her people around her, the folder under her arm, and she was smiling for the cameras that were still set up along the wall. He left a minute later, alone again, and he walked past where I was standing, and he didn't look at me and I didn't say anything to him. The room emptied out. The crew started breaking down the lights. Someone came over and asked me if I got good levels on the backup feed, and I said yes, I got good levels, and I packed up my board and I walked out to my car in the parking garage. I sat there for a long time. I didn't turn the engine on. I just sat there with my hands on the wheel and the smell of stale coffee still in my nose and the buzz of that overhead light still humming in my head. I drove home and I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed and I kept thinking about the question. The one I couldn't hear, the one she couldn't answer, the one that nobody ever asked her again because the cameras had already stopped rolling. I still can't watch the footage when it replays. I don't mean the footage from that night, I mean any footage like that. Any political discussion, any interview, any moment where someone is pretending to be in control and I can see that they're not. I change the channel. I close the tab. I walk out of the room. I don't know why. It's not like I'm afraid of it. It's not like it makes me uncomfortable in a way I can explain. It's more like I saw something in that room that I wasn't supposed to see, and now I can't unsee it, and every time I watch something like it happen again, I feel like I'm watching a replay of the same moment I already watched once before. The smell of stale coffee. He still follows me. Every hotel lobby, every conference room, every place where people gather to pretend they have more control than they do. It comes back and I'm there again, watching the waveform, watching her throat, watching the moment when someone ran out of answers and had to pretend they hadn't. I don't know what any of this means. I don't know what I was supposed to learn from it. I just know that I was there and I saw what I saw, and for a long time I thought about telling someone and then I didn't, and now I'm telling you. That's the whole story. What you do with it is up to you.